Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the second season of Artist to Storyteller. My name is Amiko Matsuo, and I'm art faculty at South Seattle College. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's conversation with international artists Ken and Julia Yonetani. Before I introduce Ken, Julia, and Justin, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement to set our intention and energy before we become immersed in our conversation. We would like to acknowledge that Artist to Storyteller project is located in West Seattle, the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. Members of our team were born and raised on the traditional lands of the Suquamish, Seclalam, Chumash, Tongva, Shawnee, and Kickapoo tribes, and we would like to honor the stewardship of these indigenous peoples whose land and stories we now have the privilege of having been shaped by. I'd also like to take this time to acknowledge that our hearts and thoughts are with the Ukrainian community and with our Russian community seeking peace during these times. And as we approach the 11th anniversary of the triple disasters of the 311 in Fukushima, Japan, we invited Ken and Julia to be in conversation about art and nature that is haunted by the anxieties and effects of catastrophic change on a planetary scale. So I'd like to share just a little bit about the Artist to Storyteller series for those of you that are new and joining us for the first time. Welcome. The Artist and Storyteller speakers was fueled by the desire to put BIPOC artists, performers, and activists directly in conversation with students and the community, and to create a new space for human connection and celebrating creativity in all its forms. And our second season exploring the theme of return. And for this talk, we are so excited to be partnering with UW East Asia Center and UW Japan Studies Program for our first international event. It also happens to be our first anniversary. So this is our first anniversary of Artist to Storyteller. And okay, and now I'd like to welcome my co-organizer and co-moderator for this talk, Justin Jesty. Justin researches the relationship between art and social movements in post-war Japan. He recently published the book Art and Engagement in Early Post-War Japan. This is through Cornell University Press, which was awarded the 2019 ASAP Book Prize by the Association for the Study of Arts of the Present. He is currently researching contemporary socially engaged art. And in 2017, he edited a two-part special issue on the topic in Field, a journal of socially engaged art criticism. He has published extensively and several articles on post-war social documentary. I invite you to explore his work. It's really great. Hi, Justin. And so now I'm going to hand it off to you, Justin, to introduce our guest artists.
Amiko, thank you. Thanks very much for including me in this event. I'm really excited to meet Ken and Julia. I'd just like to introduce the artists who are visiting with us from Japan. Ken and Julia Yonetani are a Japanese-Australian contemporary artist duo. Their large-scale installations are based on extensive field work and research, often collaborating with scientists. In 2009, Ken Yonetani was part of the Australian representation for the Venice Biennale. They've exhibited together in Europe, North America, Asia, and Australia. Recently, their work, and this was even prior to COVID-19, has focused on microbes, the microbiome, and the breakdown and balance of numerous ecosystems, including inside the human body. They have an organic farm and studio in Kyoto, Japan, which is where they're joining us from today. Thank you for being up so early in the morning to be with us. And thank you, Amiko, for including me. And I realized we should have had somebody introducing you as well. But let's move forward from here. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'm thinking we can turn it over to you, Ken and Julia. So you will be sharing some images with us, and then we'll have a conversation about it.
Sure, great, thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. It's really lovely to be here. I'm sorry if our brains are not completely working, but
yeah, 6 a.m. here.
So we're really happy to be a part of this talk, and we don't have a lot of time, so it's going to be a little bit rushed, maybe introducing our work, but hopefully Justin will be able to pinpoint aspects and Amiko of what's relevant for the discussion later on. So we were actually both born in Tokyo, obviously to very different families and lifestyle.
Yeah, and she actually came with family to Tokyo because her father is a businessman and staying just 18 months stay in Kyoto, Tokyo, and we didn't meet each other at the time, and yeah, this is the Tokyo, our high school in the middle of the high scraper buildings.
Your high school.
Yeah, my high school. And after graduation, I got a job in foreign exchange market and trading Japanese yen and US dollars with $1 million amount. Every day is just so exciting and so tired. And next year, second year actually, I moved to derivative market. At the times, the brokers in between bankers, but now it's most of them are computerized. Buy and sell is the minimum amount is $10 million. So can't mistake. But I did. And after 3 years spending foreign exchange market, I actually searched my life, and finally I found a job here. My new boss is in Okinawa, traditional pottery. This is more peaceful and traditional potter. They're making a lot of pots with wood kiln, and we made the fire for making a pot 4 times a year. And every day I made lots of Okinawan traditional pot. Like this, it's very famous trademark of fish. I made a lot of traditional works every day, but eventually I wanted to make something for myself. And spending 3 years of apprentice, I actually applied school of art in Australia, and started the master course. And my first work was I focused on environment issue as a theme, and CSIRO. This is a Australian scientific institution. It was right next to the art school, so I went there and researched about Australian endangered butterflies. I started created lots of endangered butterflies with ceramic style and spent 6 months to make thousands of fragile tiles featured with Australian endangered butterflies and lots of labors, and eventually I covered the whole gallery space. It is the museum of CSIRO. And then in opening night, I let people step and break them. This work titled Fumie. It's Japanese historical tiles featured Jesus on the tile to step on to find out who's the Christian, and the shogun find if shogun found the Christian to the people refuse to step on the tiles and let them in prison and killed. But I actually made a butterfly tiles. In half an hour, they broke into the piece like this. And after graduation, I actually created. Yeah, still in art school, and I made the second work to create with theme of coral bleaching. I love diving. But Okinawan's coral is almost dead. It's not like this beautiful, but most of them are bleached. 95% of coral of Okinawans is bleached. I researched with Australian Marine Institute. So one scientist researching about coral issue with river runoff of sugar industry. So I made the sugar coral reef. It's called the Sweet Barrier Reef. This work went to Venice Biennale, 2009. Made edible sculpture as well, and let them eat for the opening. And after making sugar, we made sculpture out of salt.
This is a picture from Mildura in the middle of Australia. And I think maybe the west coast of America has similar issues, but as a result of over-irrigation and clearing of the forest, there's a lot of salinification. So we were looking at the agricultural methods in Australia and the environmental impact of those methods using the material of salt as opposed to sugar. So I'll just go through these really quickly. That's when the tap gets turned off at a farm. And this is the salt salinity issue in the region. So as a way to try and stop the salt seeping into the river system of Australia, they have this thing called the salt interception scheme. which drains all of the really salty water away from the river system. So we use the salt that's harvested through that scheme. And this was the final work, The Last Supper, which is a 9-meter long table, all made completely out of salt. And all of this work is made out of salt. And during that time was actually 11 years ago, what you were, Amiko was talking about, the Fukushima disaster. And that really impacted us. Both Ken had family in Tokyo. And we really wanted to make a work related to that. Obviously, but we weren't in Japan at that time. We were overseas. So we wanted to make a work that was related to Fukushima, but also nuclear power on a more global level. And we looked at the uranium mining issue in Australia to begin with. This is Arnhem Land in Australia, which is an amazing place in the Northern Territory in Australia, autonomous Indigenous region. And there's a story there, the Green Ant Dreaming, that if you disturb this area where there was uranium mining, the green ant will come back and wreak havoc on the earth. So that was a story, I guess, as storytellers that we were interested in.
Yeah, I think same kind of a story in Canada, in America as
yeah,
well,
lots of
like
stories.
Hopi Indians.
This is a real green ant. And this is the Ranger mine in Australia, which is the biggest uranium mine. So we decided to, again, focus on material. Obviously, uranium itself is a difficult material to work with, but we thought it would be great to be able to work with uranium glass, which has a tiny bit of either natural or depleted uranium inside it. And this was the first work we made. It's called What the Birds Knew, and it's a huge ant. And as Ken just mentioned, there's lots of stories. There's another story in Japan at the only site in Japan that's ever been mined for uranium, a similar kind of story, but with a spider. So we decided to also make a spider. This is a spider. It's called Spider Tail. And our other kind of big work in uranium glass was Crystal Palace. The title of the work is drawn from the actual Crystal Palace, which was built obviously in England in the 1851 World Expo. Please correct me if I have that date wrong.
57? 6? Well, I don't know.
This Crystal Palace actually ended up being burnt in the 1930s and was kind of a symbol of the fall of the British Empire in a way. And these images of the Crystal Palace also kind of were parallel with the images of Fukushima for us. And the kind of, I guess, the breakdown in this idea of technology as the savior for everything in a Japanese context in relation to nuclear power. So we decided to use the symbol of chandelier because it was a very important symbol in terms of consumption and electricity. And we decided to make a chandelier for every single country that has nuclear power.
United States is the biggest one.
The biggest one. We also have one for Ukraine, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. And obviously Japan. And this one right in the middle actually is the Ukrainian chandelier. Obviously recently that has been on the news with war in the region. I guess the problem with nuclear power in relation to war, man-made and also natural disasters. And another work that we made related to nuclear issues is also a work called The Three Wishes. It's a much smaller work, and it was made through collaboration with scientists in Okinawa who were looking at the impacts of Fukushima on a particular butterfly. And we were also inspired by a Disney work, which is an old animation and also comic called Our Friend the Atom, which looks at nuclear power as this kind of savior for humanity. This is the World Expo in 1964 in the US. And this is the work. It's called The Three Wishes. It has a butterfly that we raised together with the scientists on a Disney image. And very briefly, just talking about our experiences, we were very inspired by going to Arnhem Land and hearing the stories of the Indigenous communities of the region. And also we were really inspired by the role that Aboriginal art has in the traditions and cultures of Indigenous Australia. Art is not just something that you hang on your wall. It's actually a part of how the story is told. And how the law is portrayed, obviously, and represented for generations and generations. So we were really inspired by this role that art has, which is beyond just, you know, a decorative. And we kind of see our life as you know, an artwork in a way. How to kind of live is also a form of art. So we decided to take our concerns about environment and also agricultural production to practice in the form of an organic farm. And originally this for us was also a kind of an art project, how to become sustainable. And this is Ken going back to the Edo period, trying to plant a lot of rice.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
This is back in the 20th century, just. And this was the first meal that we managed to make that was made of things completely that we grew. When we started farming, we became really interested in the role that microorganisms play in the soil and how this is connected to our health. And that's how we became interested in the idea of the microbiome. And research on this has really exploded recently with DNA sequencing and the understanding that microorganisms play a huge role in our own bodies, and how chemicals, especially related to agriculture, can impact that. We looked at our own microbiome. I think that's my mouth. With scientists at the Queensland University of Technology in Australia.
Yeah, her mouth is more rich than mine's.
Rich with
the microbiomes.
So this is a picture of how microorganisms impact the life of coral, very symbiotic relationship with microorganisms and the life of coral. And this is the circle of life in the human body and how microorganisms impact it. And this is what we looked at in our most recent work, which is Dysbiotica. It's kind of a mixture of coral and also microorganisms at the same time. Everything is kind of bleached and white. So looking at the breakdown in balance, dysbiotica was a kind of a word that we made up from the term dysbiosis. Yeah, so I think it would be great to continue the discussion now, if that's okay. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll, I'll just, yeah, we can just begin talking. I have one of my eyes on the Q&A box in Zoom. So if people in the audience have questions, you can type them into the chat or the Q&A interface on your end, and I think they will arrive in front of me. So happy to kind of put those to Ken and Julia as they come in as well. I wanted to maybe start with your most recent work, Dysbiotica, and ask some questions about that work, and then that will maybe, I think, reference some of your other works as well. I'm really interested in the materials that you use, and in previous works, the work looks similar in that you used white materials, sugar and salt, and in those cases, kind of white, dry, inorganic, in some ways seem to, symbolize death. I was wondering about your choice of materials for Dysbiotica, and was wondering, I guess one question I had about the sugar and salt works are how do they decompose over time? And then I was wondering if you could talk about the materials that you used for Dysbiotica and some of the choices you made there. And also with Dysbiotica, if you could talk about the sort of the patterning and your own thought process because kind of quite complicated visually and sort of texturally. If you could talk about sort of the minutia, or I'm not sure if minutia is the right word, but the arrangements or the aesthetics of the pieces themselves.
Yeah.
Lots of questions.
Yeah. For the materials, we actually, the Julia told before, we're interested in the soil. And when we started farming, it's the key point is the microbiome in the soil. So when we look at the material to make, the ceramics is the best way to make. And the other question is,
yeah, definitely. White is I guess it's a symbol of death for us, and the use of material in Dysbiotica. It's actually we're becoming like really for a ceramicist. It's totally kind of not done what we were doing, which was just incorporating ceramics into other materials as well. So the actual base of the work is just a mannequin, like a FRP kind of based, and we were looking at the dysbiosis, I guess, between those materials, and also the connection to selling, the consumerism, and also the human microbiome in a way, how that cycle works culturally. Yeah.
I don't know why it is touching the deeply of the human psychologically, and that's why we choose the white color.
Yeah.
And the texture of the sculpture. So I actually got a
yeah. He's got that fear of holes, and there's a word for it in English. I've forgotten.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the word, but yeah, I understand.
The surface of the lots of holes is I actually scared of it.
That's so funny, Ken. I have that same thing too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So our work is very disturbing for people that have this fear of holes.
Yeah, and yeah, it's actually my opinion. You know, the indigenous Australian indigenous actually made a beautiful, making a beautiful the paintings, and actually it's actually storyteller, the artworks, and with lots of dot. That I guess the dot actually they express of microbiome, because they knew from 1,000 years ago the microbiome is a key to make this world. So I guess
connection on a kind of a level that we cannot see.
Because I found the very interesting paintings in Australia. They actually created the DNA sequences in the paintings. Yeah, like spirals things without electric microscope.
And in the thinking of it sort of in comparison to Australian Indigenous art, I'm interested in the way that the way that in your works it seems that the materials that you use and the way that you put them together, and thinking about sort of all of the orifices in Dysbiotica. I'm not really sure if I have the fear of holes necessarily, but it has that kind of a grotesque quality, I suppose. It kind of seems like it's somebody's body turned inside out to show sort of and magnified. To show sort of all of the living things within what many people sort of assume and think and feel as sort of a single thing or sort of our own thing. So I felt that I was interested sort of in the tonality of your works. They seem quite dark in a way, that they have sort of a warning inherent in them. I was wondering if that is sort of something that you sort of set out to achieve with the works, or something that kind of just is just what ends up happening. And also kind of wondering if maybe the 3 wishes, the work with the butterfly, is sort of more colorful and playful. If there are some works that you find are sort of more playful and celebratory.
We do try and make our works kind of visually intriguing, or I don't know if attractive is the right word, but to bring people into the work. And definitely that is kind of where we start from. But in terms of making the work also eerie, as you say, or dark, I guess that comes from our motivation a lot of the time, which is our own anxieties. It's definitely a key kind of motivation for us to even start thinking about the issue. Is we both kind of have like anxious personalities, so thinking about these kind of issues is something in our daily life, and then we just it's a way of healing for us in a way, is making the art. So maybe that comes out in the final kind of work as well. And yeah, it's a maybe a warning, but it's a warning that comes from our own anxieties, rather than kind of trying to preach to people about what they should be doing. Yeah.
And so, yeah, Amiko, please.
Oh, I think I was going to try to connect some of the things that I heard from your presentation too, which something that arose in my mind is this issue of translation. You know, for me, this is our first time having the chance to interview somebody international. So what kind of issues of translation do you encounter? I'm thinking about with, even as we think about 3/11 and how we're witnessing, you know, the fears of escalation with Russia, and we all have different understandings and lived experiences that we bring to like how we approach your work and these big sort of anxieties that you're talking about. So yeah, maybe this question about translation in terms of the work and how it's perceived by different audiences, translation in terms of how we each understand these big issues, even translating your anxieties into a different material. Those are the connections that I'm making. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really big issue too. I don't know how to answer it. Translation, definitely. Different ways of seeing the world.
Let me just sorry to interrupt you, but I'm thinking like in terms of some of the Japanese history that I heard you talk about, Ken. I thought that was like really interesting, and I'm wondering if we can touch on that just a bit.
You mean the story about the spider?
Fumie.
Fumie, there's a spider. Also the Edo period farming, for example.
Okay. Yeah. Fumie is I really interested in the history. So Fumie is a kind of the metaphor of environment right now. So I thought it's I can use the Fumie different issues like environment, like there are the things for peace or yeah. So I use that concept the title with Jesus, the Christian have to step on or yeah. So used for environment issue right now. So because people living in this society using cars and using petrols and making pollution, so kind of Fumie tiles. And the spider the story also interested in same as the Australian indigenous story, the ant story. And we thought like kind of the old indigenous stories is telling the futures, same as our anxiety to make artwork. So the visually indigenous making works or a story to tell the people not to do that. Yeah. So kind of things we really interested in.
For the Crystal Palace work, I guess especially this kind of dislocation, the idea of dislocation. And we were in Australia at the time, and it wasn't, people around us weren't as worried about it as we were, obviously. I'm not sure if you have that feeling as well, being connected to a place, but then disconnected at the same time. And I guess with Crystal Palace, we were trying to kind of look at the issue like globally. This is not just an issue of Fukushima. It's kind of everywhere, and we're all connected. So that was a motivation for us as well. There's all these really good questions coming.
Yeah.
Maybe we should. Do we do this at the end or?
Yeah, if you see a good question that you want to speak to, for sure, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
The one right at the end is about the deer, which we kind of skipped through. So maybe we can go back to that. Yeah, so this work, which was a part of Dysbiotica as well, but we actually made some deer completely out of ceramics. Yeah, it was kind of a spiritual work for us, more rather than looking at the warning of environmental impacts. It was more looking at just starting to question what happens, after the death. There's lots of deer around where we live, so we were inspired by the kind of spiritual representation of deer in the Japanese culture, and that's where that work comes from. And obviously, yes, also drawing on ideas of hunting and the hunting trophy. Yeah, and Ken, there's a question about you going from trading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually, when I was a kid, I really loved nature, and also loved art. But I got I don't know, the pressure from my parents or myself. I actually went to university and to get economic degrees, and then I started working in the broker. And but every day in the office when I was trading, I don't know. I felt something luck, and yeah, I wanted to change my life, so I just jumped in the cold water to search my life. To take how many years? Yeah, many years to find the new life. Yeah.
Maybe you're still searching.
Yeah, of course.
But neither of us come from art backgrounds originally. So I was also did a PhD in international relations and history. So very different backgrounds. But I think we bring that into the work in different ways as well. Yeah.
I was thinking that the metaphor of fumie is so interesting. So like fumie are like, yeah, in the Edo period when Christianity was illegal in Japan, there were interrogators who would try to flesh out who was Christian and who wasn't by putting a sort of woven picture of Jesus on the floor. And so if you refused to step on this image of Jesus, then they knew you were Christian. So you couldn't have it both ways, I guess, if you're not to betray your faith. So I find that such an interesting idea that sort of being in the contemporary world, we're all forced to kind of step on this image of what we believe in, just to kind of live daily life, as you say, like driving cars or just sort of being enmeshed in the contemporary economic system. I think that's such a powerful metaphor. In where you are now, managing your own farm, growing your own food. I was wondering if you could speak to how that has changed your perspective, or if it hasn't. And also is kind of wondering if there's a kind of network of other people that are trying to make similar turns in their lives, living more sustainably, living in a way where they're kind of sort of more responsible to and responsive to the natural world. I was wondering, how you feel after, is it 10 years? How long have you been farming now?
7 years.
7 years. Mm.
Yeah. As you said, yeah, in context of fumie tiles, it's actually definitely changed my life and our life. because we try not to step on the familiar, and the best way is farming just yourself, yeah, and with organic farming, and for 6 years our life was dramatically changed. A lot of things because view of the world. First of all, view of the world with microbiome. It's yeah the best things to change.
Yeah, so we were actually working on Dysbiotica when the COVID pandemic began, which was kind of ironic in a way. But and even we were planning on showing that work in New York, and that show got cancelled. So we actually never managed to show the work in the US, but we ended up showing it in Japan instead. So yeah, all these things going on at the same time, and definitely our worldview was completely changed. But also, in a sense, we went back to this. Ken went back to the importance of the economy, because when you start organic farming, you realize how hard it is to make a living making food. Although that could change. I think it will change with what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
But so we had a whole different series of work that we actually are exploring the economy, which we didn't introduce in this talk because there wasn't enough time. But maybe on a different opportunity, we can look at that as well. And I think when you look at economic systems, it's really when you begin to understand, follow the money, how things are playing out in the world now. And we still Ken still looks at the market, and, we're always talking about the market, and it's kind of really scary what's going on now. I think it's really a change in the entire international system and how the money will work, how national economies are really kind of exploding as we talk. So
yeah. When I started working as a broker, when I looked at the derivative market every day in 1996 to 1999, and I thought it's gonna be explored because it's a crazy world. It's a kind of a world gambling market. And when we started farming as well, so when we looking at farming industry is it's clearly it's really big a market, and we are making organic vegetables and crops that the 99% of farmers making modern farming way. So because it means it's actually involved with mega farming industries, because paying a lot of chemicals and machines and pesticide and artificial fertilizer.
Are there alternative economies growing up in Japan?
That was your question. Definitely with COVID, there's been a real kind of move back to the countryside in Japan. Although I'm not sure how revolutionary it is yet. But definitely there, especially young people coming back and starting to grow their own food, and people really interested in the fact that you're farming. They're like, oh wow, but more like on a imaginary level. Oh yeah, I'd really like to do that, but it looks really hard, kind of thing. Yeah. But I think there is definitely a movement coming back to the countryside and seeing the countryside in a different light, obviously with remote work as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit last week, I guess it was, about just some of these traditional farming techniques too. And, we were also talking about the idea of Hanohangei, which is, it translates to half farming and half like, in the ceramics context, half like handwork, right? So for our audience, I'm wondering if you want to elaborate a little bit more on this idea of Hanohangei, and or like I think the idea of Satoyama also is a particular kind of land use practice where you all are working in an area where it's like a transitional space. So I'm wondering if you wanted to tie that into your ideas about how you're living and your communal sustainable living is part of your art practice.
Hanohangei is quite popular in Japan, becoming popular in Japan now. And around us, some artists actually living like that. Yeah. Because I think especially with COVID, last 2 years, people actually not meaning to living in the big cities to struggle or to survive as an artist. So lots of resources in countryside and lots of learning in countryside as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of kind of, I don't know if you'd say tensions, but, a lot of different ways of looking at the world in that as well. I mean, the whole traditional village structure in Japan is very closed in a way. And, we were the first people to come here. It's like, oh yeah, someone came to live here, as well as you guys. And we're like, oh yeah, when was that? It's like, oh, 15 years ago. It's like, yeah, so most people in our village all have the same surname, and their families have lived here for 400 years. So there's all this tradition that you're also kind of jumping into, and how to negotiate that on a daily level obviously is an issue. And I think a lot of Japanese who live in the city don't want to have to negotiate with that, because there's too much, there's too much like history there. So yeah, there's always those negotiations going on, I think, in the Japanese countryside, with the new people coming in and young people coming back, and people who lived here for a long time. Yeah.
So you both mentioned that you kind of came to art from other careers and other kind of educational backgrounds. I was wondering, given that perspective, how do you feel about the art world as a sort of set of institutions and art making in terms of your practice? How do you feel the sort of the reward, but also maybe if there are dissatisfactions with it? I'm curious about your experience expressing yourself through art.
Yeah, honestly, art world is very small. I felt so.
You mean like closed?
Yeah, closed. Yeah, and the tiny world. So we wanted to break the walls to expand the field to more interdisciplinary, knowledge and experiences.
Yeah, we have looked at this in some of our pieces, which we didn't introduce, like the Last Supper Market, which was a kind of a supermarket that we made for an art fair. and also the Emperor's New Clothes, which was a work we made completely out of Japanese yen. So yes, definitely this idea of what is value, and in terms of the art market, it's something that is constructed, and we always look at that from a kind of a viewpoint of well, a realistic one, but at the same time, it's not a world that we completely want to be in at the same time. So yeah, we're always fighting with that as artists as well.
Yeah. So one of the motivation to be a farmer with it.
Yeah. Finally, there is like one question on the five senses. Maybe we could talk about that. So that's this work, the salt work. Yeah, so that was basically drawing on definitely the art history, the five senses, which is an artwork by Bruegel. And we were looking at the idea of the five senses, but also moving beyond the five senses. So using your sixth sense, but also the importance of your senses in terms of gaining knowledge, which is something ironically talking about on Zoom. But when we were farming, we really felt the importance of using every sense, and how your everyday life is also you're gaining knowledge through your senses all the time, and the importance of that. Yeah. So maybe you wrap it up, Justin.
Okay. Right. Well, I was just thinking of five senses. I was thinking of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and sort of the birds stopped singing. The birds were dying. So this was sort of the signal that she uses to kind of frame that book. So. And I feel that with all of your work, and as you mentioned, you didn't really have a chance to introduce the works that use money and invoke the monetary system. But it seems like your works have, as you said, the kind of sensitivity to systems that in a lot of cases, or in sort of everyday experience, are pretty much invisible, or problems that are invisible, but that are hiding this sort of burgeoning crisis within them, that even as it gets larger and larger and more threatening, doesn't become more visible, and doesn't become something that people are aware of as a sort of threat to late life for everyone on the planet. So I hope that well, I guess COVID, if we need another lesson in this, has taught us that it's kind of out of our control. But I do hope that that there'll be chances for you to come to New York for exhibition. And also, I'm really interested in the way that sort of primary production, sort of like primary production and art, so the kind of imagination and creativity of kind of the two ends of productivity that have been sort of, both of them have been sort of put out of the consciousness of modern urbanized society. So I really see so many interesting ways that you'll be bringing these together. So looking forward to learning more. I'm sorry it was only 1 hour.
Well, I hope you can visit. Maybe we can have a talk then as well.
Sure.
Yeah, well, thank you for sort of connecting us back to our theme, which again, we were talking last week about this theme of the idea of return. And I think, Justin, thank you for that. That was like a great way to sort of help us think about that again, in terms of what we want to recover from the past, if anything, and how might we imagine new ways of being, together in the world, in the future. So, well, I'd like to just be mindful of the time and thank you all for being here to spend time with us and share this space with us today. I did want to say that please visit our website for links. After we finish this conversation, you'll be able to see more of Ken and Julia's work and catch up on some of the other amazing conversations we've had from the last season and also from this season as well. So there will be recordings of conversations from the entire series live on our website under the video archive page. So thank you again all for being here. And I wish you all a good afternoon or a good day. Thank you so much.